here.
You move with purpose, carrying the unconscious form of Messer Tun towards the infirmary entrance. The scarlet daggers part for you, their eyes following your every move, and you soon find yourself within what appears to be a temporary medical setup within the Vala's conservatory. The air here is thick with the scent of damp earth, exotic pollen, and medicinal herbs, a stark contrast to the sterile expectation of an infirmary. Lush, bioluminescent plants, some with leaves like iridescent insect wings, others with blossoms that pulse with soft light, line the walls and even overhang the temporary cots. Strange, chirping sounds emanate from hidden corners, the gentle hum of unseen insects. Several cots are arranged, some already occupied by injured scarlet daggers, their faces pale but their eyes still sharp. An elf druid, lithe and pale with sea-glass green hair and robes woven from beetle-shell thread, moves with silent grace among them, his dusky bronze eyes ringed with faint scleral iridescence. He smells faintly of nectar and myrrh. You gently lay the halfling down on one of the empty cots. Her crude splintered leg is still awkwardly bent, but the binding you placed on her holds her secure. The elf druid pauses in his ministrations to a wounded guard and turns his attention to Messer Tun. He approaches, his bare feet making no sound on the mossy floor, and his gaze, though calm, is intensely focused on the halfling's leg and her pale face. He reaches out a slender, tattooed hand, hovering it gently over her injured limb, a faint green light beginning to emanate from his fingertips. He looks up at you, his voice a soft, almost melodic whisper barely audible over the hum of the conservatory. Her leg is broken, and she has suffered a significant blow to the head. She will need time to mend, both physically and, I suspect, mentally. His eyes, ancient and knowing, then meet yours. It will be some time before she is coherent enough for questioning. We will ensure her comfort and recovery here. What do you do?
Yeah, the head. God damn it. Hit the fucking end, you mother. I hate that.
The elf druid, Thevan Drelmort, continued his ministrations, the faint green light from his fingertips pulsing gently over the halfling's twisted leg. His slender fingers, adorned with those strange, segmented limb tattoos, tapped together in a silent, rhythmic sequence, 3 taps, then 5, then 7, a quiet, almost imperceptible drumbeat. He nodded slowly, his bronze eyes, still ringed with that faint iridescence, remaining fixed on Messer Tun's prone form. Indeed, the bone is shattered, but not beyond mending. The blow to her head, it has shaken her roots. A deep bruising of the cerebral cortex, I believe. He paused, his gaze finally lifting to meet yours, unblinking. You will be informed when she begins to stir, and again when her mind is clear enough to bear the weight of questioning. His finger tapping paused for a moment before resuming its silent, complex rhythm. My name is Thevan Drelmort. I am the caretaker of these specimens. He gestured vaguely around the lush, insect-filled conservatory with his free hand, a subtle, almost imperceptible shift in his posture, indicating his deep connection to the living things around him. His voice remained a soft, almost ethereal whisper, yet it carried an undeniable authority within these glass walls.
I don't know how to spell infirmary.
You nod to Thevan Drelmort, acknowledging his words and his name, then turn to leave the hushed, insect-filled confines of the Vala's conservatory. The shift in atmosphere is immediate and jarring. As you step out of the quiet, humid air of the conservatory and back into the main courtyard of the Regent's estate, the tension that had permeated the air earlier feels even more acute. The Murkrun fog still swirls, but it's thinner here, allowing the faint, cold light of the moon to pierce through. The scarlet daggers remain vigilant, their stances rigid, while the elven nobles whisper amongst themselves, their gazes occasionally flicking towards the conservatory entrance. Before you can take more than a few steps, a figure detaches itself from the knot of Oddfell Run council members near the main entrance. It is a stout, stern-faced human woman, her dark, severe robes embroidered with the silver sigil of the Promissory Guild. Her grey hair is pulled back in a tight bun, and her eyes, sharp and unyielding, fix on you with an intensity that promises no quarter. She carries a heavy, leather-bound tome clutched against her chest. She strides directly into your path, blocking your way, her voice resonating with an authority that brooks no argument, though it is deliberately kept low, a ripple of sound rather than a shout. She began, her tone flat and devoid of warmth. She paused, her gaze sweeping over your person, lingering for a moment on your changed appearance before returning to your face. Her questions hung in the chill, fog-laced air, demanding immediate answers. She stood poised, her expression unyielding, clearly expecting a full account. The stern-faced human woman from the Promissory Guild, her dark robe seeming to absorb the faint moonlight, stiffened at your words. Her sharp, unyielding eyes narrowed, and her lips thinned into a tight, disapproving line. The heavy tome she clutched seemed to press even harder against her chest.
Indeed,
She stated, her voice now a low, dangerous hum that carried a clear warning.
you will address the full council in the morning, Reggie Orminal. Be assured, every detail of this incident will be scrutinized. We expect a complete account.
She did not move from your path immediately, holding your gaze for a long moment, a silent promise of the rigorous questioning to come. Then, with a curt, almost imperceptible nod, she finally stepped aside, allowing you to pass. Her eyes, however, remained fixed on your retreating form as you made your way through the bustling courtyard, past the vigilant scarlet daggers and whispering elven nobles, towards the quieter sections of the estate. The regent's estate, despite its grandeur, offered quarters that were functional rather than opulent. Your assigned room was simple, with a sturdy cot, a small writing desk, and a single, unadorned window looking out onto the fog-shrouded grounds. The air inside was cool and still, a welcome reprieve from the tense atmosphere of the courtyard. You found your way to your quarters, the lingering scent of blood and murkrun fog clinging to your clothes. The events of the night, from the brutal encounter at the Lantern Rest Inn to the unsettling interactions back at the estate, weighed heavily. The cot, though plain, promised a much-needed oblivion. As you lay down, the sounds of the estate, the distant clatter of armor, the murmur of voices, the occasional chirp of an unseen creature from the conservatory, began to fade. Exhaustion, both physical and mental, claimed you, pulling you swiftly into a deep, dreamless sleep. The next morning dawned, the murkrun fog having finally receded, replaced by a grey, overcast sky. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of damp stone and distant wood smoke. The quiet of your room was soon broken by a soft, insistent rap at your door. It was time. The council awaited.
I wasn't recording this, then yeah, I would probably say I don't even bother getting changed out of. I just put on a robe and go address the council. But nah.
The soft rap at your door pulls you from the depths of sleep. The grey morning light filtering through your window confirms the new day. You rise, the lingering aches from the previous night a dull thrum beneath your skin, and prepare yourself for the inevitable confrontation. Donning your armour, you make your way through the quiet corridors of the Regent's estate, the scent of damp stone and distant breakfast fires filling the air, until you reach the Regent's foyer. The foyer, usually a receiving area, has been transformed. Heavy, dark wood chairs are arranged in a semicircle around a massive, polished stone table. Torches flicker in sconces along the walls, casting dancing shadows that lend a sombre gravity to the room. The air is thick with anticipation and the faint scent of parchment and old dust. Seated at the table are several figures. The stern-faced human woman from the Promissory Guild, her robes as severe as her expression, is already present, a heavy tome laid open before her. Nearby, Fela Vaniali, the elven cleric, sits with an air of quiet authority, her silver hair gleaming in the torchlight, her gaze calm but piercing. And then there is another, truly enormous human man, whose sheer bulk seems to consume the chair he occupies. His jowly face is ruddy, and his small, dark eyes gleam with a shrewd, almost cynical amusement. He wears robes of deep emerald, heavily embroidered with what appear to be stylized gold coins, indicating his affiliation with the Ashcote Guild. A faint, earthy smell, like rich soil and freshly dug ore, emanates from him. He takes up so much space that the chairs on either side of him are empty, pushed back as if by an invisible force. As you step into the foyer, all eyes turn to you. The Promissory Guild woman's expression remains unyielding. Fela Vaniali's gaze is steady and assessing, and the large man merely grunts, a low, rumbling sound in his chest. You begin to recount the events, starting from your encounter with Lady Myra Thornevale, the unexpected plunge into the Merc Run, the bandit hideout, the gruesome discoveries, and your subsequent actions at the Lantern Rest Inn, culminating in the capture of the halfling Messer Tun. You lay out everything you know, the details of the journal, the Thornevale connection, and the state of the inn. As you finish your account, a heavy silence falls over the room. The promissory guild woman makes a meticulous note in her tome, her quill scratching loudly in the stillness. Fela Vaniali's expression remains unreadable, her eyes thoughtful. Then, from the massive man in the emerald robes, a loud, guttural snort erupts, followed by a booming, unrestrained laugh that echoes through the foyer. "Ha, a Thornivale carriage," you say, "and a Thornivale lass, caught in such a pickle by the likes of you." He slaps a meaty hand on the table, the sound like a distant thunderclap. "And you, a mere delivery man, cleaning up the mess of the greatest noble house in Odrun Fell. Preposterous." His laughter continues, a deep, rattling sound that seems to shake the very foundations of the room, his jowls jiggling with mirth.
Oh, fuck.
At your sharp command, Bate, who had been holding the leather-bound journal carefully, her expression a mix of concern and determination, quickly steps forward. Her eyes widen slightly at your sudden, aggressive tone and the sight of the sword of war. Without a word, she places the journal on the polished stone table before you, then retreats a step, her gaze flicking nervously between you and the enraged Ashcote council member. The massive human man in the emerald robes, his booming laughter cut short by the cold steel at his jowly neck, instantly ceases his mirth. His ruddy face, moments ago flushed with amusement, drains of colour, leaving his small, dark eyes wide with shock and a sudden, stark fear. A strangled gurgle escapes his throat, and his enormous bulk seems to shrink, pressing back against the chair as if trying to merge with it. He stares, utterly speechless, at the gleaming blade inches from his flesh, his breath catching in his chest. The Promissory Guild woman gasps, a sharp, indignant sound that cuts through the sudden, heavy silence. Her hand flies to her chest, clutching at her robes.
What is the meaning of this?
She demands, her voice trembling with outrage, though she does not rise from her seat.
You dare threaten a council member in the Regent's foyer after such an unorthodox report.
Her eyes, usually so sharp and composed, are wide with disbelief and anger. Fela Vaniali, the elven cleric, remains unmoving, her silver hair catching the torchlight. Her calm demeanour is shaken only by a slight tightening around her eyes, and her lips press into a thin line. Her gaze shifts from the sword of war to your face, then to the terrified Ashcote man.
Reggie Ormanolf,
She says, her voice low and even, cutting through the promissory woman's sputtering.
release him. This is not how the council conducts its business.
Her tone carries an undercurrent of warning, a clear demand for order to be restored. The air in the foyer crackles with tension, all eyes fixed on you and the blade at the Ashcote man's throat. The silence, save for the frantic, shallow breaths of the terrified council member, is deafening. What do you do? The air in the Regent's foyer became impossibly thick, a palpable tension pressing down on everyone present. The flickering torchlight seemed to cast longer, more grotesque shadows as your words, "I am the Regent," hung in the silence like a thunderclap. The enormous human man beneath the sword of war remained frozen, his eyes wide with a terror that had completely eclipsed his previous arrogance. He continued to hyperventilate, a faint, desperate wheezing sound escaping his throat, but no words. The Promissory Guild woman gasped again, a sharp, disbelieving sound. Her face, already pale, seemed to drain of all colour, leaving her features stark and etched with a mixture of shock and outrage. Her grip on her heavy tome tightened until her knuckles were white.
You utter blasphemy.
She finally managed to stammer, her voice barely a whisper, yet laced with venom.
To claim such a title, to threaten a council member with a blade while spouting such absurdities, this is an insult to Adran Fel itself. Release him at once, you impudent brute, or face the full wrath of the guilds.
She half rose from her seat, her eyes blazing with indignation, but did not fully stand, perhaps wary of the volatile situation. Fela Vaniali, the elven cleric, remained composed, though a flicker of something unreadable passed through her piercing silver eyes. She held your gaze, her expression thoughtful, before slowly turning her attention to the blade at the Ashcote man's neck.
Reggie Ormanolf,
She said again, her voice calm but firm, a clear note of authority in its tone.
this behavior is unseemly and will not be tolerated. If you have a claim, however outlandish, it will be heard through proper channels, not by force of arms. Release Councilman Borvin and present your evidence. Now.
Her hand, adorned with a simple silver ring, rested calmly on the table, but her posture suggested a readiness for swift action should her words be ignored. From the northern end of the foyer, the lean half-elf steward, who had been silently observing from a distance, subtly shifted his weight. His near-colourless grey eyes, which had been darting between you and the council members, now fixed solely on you, a flicker of intense, analytical curiosity in their depths. He remained silent, a silent, watchful sentinel, but his posture became subtly more alert, his hand dropping almost imperceptibly towards the slim dagger at his spine. The metallic shing of the sword of war being returned to its sheath reverberated through the foyer, a sharp sound that seemed to cut through the oppressive tension. Councilman Borvin, the enormous ashcoat man, let out a shaky, wheezing breath, his bulk slumping slightly in his chair as the immediate threat receded. His small eyes, however, remained wide and fixed on you, a mixture of disbelief and lingering terror etched onto his ruddy face. He still seemed utterly incapable of speech. The promissory guild woman, her face a mask of furious indignation, stared at you as if you had just conjured a demon. Her lips trembled with suppressed rage, and for a moment it seemed she might explode.
The regent.
She finally sputtered, her voice rising in pitch.
You are either mad or you are attempting the most audacious, treasonous deception this council has ever witnessed. The sword of war is a relic, a symbol, not some common key. And as for that journal...
She gestured dismissively towards it, her hand shaking with anger.
It is likely a forgery, a crude attempt to lend credence to your fantastical claims.
Fela Vaniali, the elven cleric, remained remarkably calm amidst the escalating chaos. Her silver eyes, however, held a new, intense focus as you spoke of the sword of war. She glanced at the sheathed blade, then back to you, her expression thoughtful.
The sword of war is indeed a relic of immense significance.
She stated, her voice even and clear, cutting through the promissory woman's sputtering.
Its legend states that only one with true claim to the regent's mantle can wield it without being consumed by its power. An old tale, perhaps, but one not lightly dismissed.
Her gaze then shifted to the leather-bound journal, still held by Bate.
Bate.
She instructed, her voice holding a quiet authority.
Place the journal on the table. Councilman Borvin, if you are recovered, I suggest you compose yourself and examine the contents as requested. It is imperative we understand the full context of this extraordinary situation.
Bate, still visibly shaken, but ever obedient, carefully placed the journal on the polished stone table within easy reach. The lean half-elf steward, who had been watching silently from the northern end of the foyer, subtly adjusted the fine silver chain at his throat. His near-colourless grey eyes, which had widened almost imperceptibly at your declaration, now flickered between you, the sword of war, and the journal. He remained perfectly still, a silent, unblinking observer, his expression unreadable, but his posture held a newfound, almost predatory alertness. A booming, guttural laugh erupts, echoing through the sombre foyer, a stark contrast to the tense silence that had settled. With a flourish, the sword of war is dropped to the polished stone floor. The heavy blade lands with a resounding clank, the sound sharp and jarring in the hushed chamber. It lies there, gleaming faintly in the torchlight, its ancient, etched runes seeming to pulse with a faint, internal light, an almost imperceptible hum vibrating in the air around it. Councilman Borvin, the colossal human man from the Ashcote Guild, flinches violently at the sword's fall. His eyes, still wide with lingering fear, dart from the face to the blade on the floor. He lets out another choked gasp, pressing himself further into his chair, as if attempting to become one with the upholstery. He doesn't even consider moving towards the sword, his terror clearly outweighing any curiosity or pride. The promissory guild woman stares at the fallen blade with a mixture of revulsion and disbelief. Her lips are pressed into a thin, white line, and her eyes narrow.
This is madness.
She hisses, her voice barely above a whisper, though laced with furious contempt.
A trick, a conjurer's illusion. I will not stoop to touch such a blasphemous object.
She recoils slightly in her chair, pulling her robes tighter around her, as if the sword itself might contaminate her. Fela Vaniali, the elven cleric, watches the sword of war intently. Her silver eyes, usually so calm, now hold a flicker of genuine curiosity, almost a scientific interest. She leans forward slightly, her gaze fixed on the blade, a thoughtful expression on her face. She does not immediately move to touch it, but her posture suggests she is considering the words, weighing the legend against the immediate, tangible presence of the ancient weapon. Her brow furrows, as if deep in thought. The lean half-elf steward remains at the northern end of the foyer, utterly still. His near-colourless grey eyes are locked onto the sword of war, then briefly flicker to Fela Vaniali, as if anticipating her next move. He makes no sound, but the subtle tension in his shoulders indicates his heightened alertness.
Fucking damn it! I know for a fact I hit the fucking... I don't fucking understand. I hit the fucking T. I see the fucking T come up, and it somehow magically changes to a fucking R.
The booming laughter that had filled the foyer was abruptly cut short as you extended your hand. With an almost imperceptible hum, the sword of war, lying inert on the stone floor, vibrated for a split second before leaping with impossible speed into your waiting grasp. The sudden, undeniable magic of the act hung in the air, a potent silence falling over the room. The blade pulsed with a faint, inner light as you held it, its ancient runes seeming to deepen in color. Then your words, "I am the Regent," struck the assembled figures like a physical blow. Before they could fully process this, you followed it with the damning accusation. The old Regent died by poisoning from you Promissory Guild councilwoman, and a thick stack of parchment, bound with a simple leather thong, clattered onto the polished table. They scattered, revealing pages filled with dense script, some with official-looking seals, others appearing to be personal correspondence, and a few with crude but unsettling diagrams. Councilman Borvin, the enormous ashcoat man, let out a choked sound, a mixture of awe and renewed terror. His eyes, already wide, seemed to bulge as he watched the sword of war obey your command. The accusation against the Promissory Guild woman, his guild's rival, seemed to momentarily pull him from his personal fear, a flicker of shrewd interest crossing his jowly face before his gaze snapped to the documents. The Promissory Guild woman, who had just been about to unleash another furious retort, froze mid-sentence. Her jaw dropped, her sharp eyes fixed first on the sword, then on the documents now strewn across the table. Her face, already pale with indignation, became ashen. A look of profound, unadulterated shock, mingled with a dawning horror, washed over her features. She stared at the papers, her breath catching in her throat, utterly speechless. Her previous anger seemed to evaporate, replaced by a cold, dreadful dawning of realization. Fela Vaniali, the elven cleric, pushed herself back in her chair, her eyes widening as the sword of war flew to your hand. A profound, almost reverent awe settled on her face, and she murmured,
"By the silvered root."
Her gaze, usually so calm and assessing, now burned with an intense, searching light as she looked at you. When the documents hit the table, her attention immediately shifted. She leaned forward, her long, elegant fingers twitching as if to reach for the papers, her expression a mix of grave concern and urgent curiosity.
These are serious accusations, Reggie Ormanal.
She said, her voice now hushed, almost solemn.
And if these documents hold the truth you claim, this changes everything.
At the northern end of the foyer, the lean half-elf steward had watched the sword of wars return to your hand with an almost imperceptible tightening of his lips. His near-colorless grey eyes, which had been unblinking, now flickered rapidly between your face, the blade, and the scattered documents. He remained utterly silent, a shadow against the wall, but a subtle tension entered his posture, as if he were bracing for an earthquake. His gaze, usually analytical, now held a deep, unreadable intensity, as though he was processing an entirely new reality. Your command slices through the heavy air of the foyer. For a beat, there is only the reverberating silence, the faint hum of the sword of war in your hand, and the panicked, shallow breathing of Councilman Borvin. No uniformed guards are immediately visible within the foyer itself, a stark absence that hangs in the tense quiet. The promissory guild woman, her face still deathly pale from the accusation and the undeniable display of the sword of war's loyalty, lets out a choked, indignant gasp. Her eyes, wide with a mixture of terror and outrage, dart frantically around the foyer, searching for any sign of her guild's authority, any familiar face to counter this sudden, crushing turn of events. Her voice, though trembling, rises to a desperate, shrill pitch, her hands still clutching her heavy tome as if it were a shield. She begins to push herself back from the table, a desperate, cornered look in her eyes, as if contemplating flight. Fela Vaniali, the elven cleric, watches the promissory guild woman intently, her silver eyes unblinking. Her gaze then shifts to the scattered documents on the table, then back to you, a profound solemnity settling on her features. She takes a slow, deliberate breath, her expression unreadable for a moment. Then, with a quiet, almost imperceptible nod of her head towards the promissory guild woman, she speaks, her voice calm but resonant with an undeniable authority.
The evidence presented, coupled with the undeniable nature of the sword of war, demands a thorough and immediate investigation. Councilwoman Lyra, you will cooperate fully.
Her words are not a question, but a decree. At Fela's subtle, yet firm, directive, the lean half-elf steward who had been observing from the northern end of the foyer moves with startling, silent efficiency. His near-colourless grey eyes, which had been fixed on the unfolding drama, now snap to the promissory guild woman. Without a word, he turns and strides purposefully towards a heavy, ornate door set into the wall, pulling a small silver whistle from his uniform pocket. A single, sharp, piercing note cuts through the air, echoing briefly through the estate beyond. Within moments, the heavy door swings open. Two burly, uniformed estate guards, their faces grim and unyielding, clad in simple leather and steel, step into the foyer. They carry no weapons, their hands at their sides, but their presence is immediate and commanding. They glance briefly at Fela Vaniali, then at you, their eyes betraying no emotion as they take in the scene. The promissory guild woman, Lyra, sees the guards, and her face contorts in a mixture of terror and fury.
No, you cannot do this. This is a violation of my rights. The Promissory Guild will hear of this. You will regret this insolence.
She shrieks, scrambling to her feet, knocking her chair backward with a clatter. Councilman Borvin, the enormous ashcoat man, watches the scene unfold, his terror momentarily forgotten in the face of his rival's downfall. A faint, almost imperceptible smirk begins to form on his jowly face, though he quickly stifles it, his eyes darting to you with a renewed, cautious respect. The two estate guards move with practiced precision, one stepping to either side of the promissory guild woman. They offer no words, no physical aggression, but their silent, unyielding presence is enough. They gently, but firmly, take her by the arms, their grip unwavering despite her furious, desperate struggles and continued protests.
Unhand me, this is treason. You will pay for this, Regent. You will all pay.
Lyra's voice, hoarse with rage and fear, echoes down the hallway as the guards, under the watchful eye of the half-elf steward, escort her firmly from the foyer, disappearing through the ornate door. The heavy door swings shut behind them with a soft click, leaving the foyer steeped in a new, profound silence, broken only by the continued, shallow breathing of Councilman Borvin. The sword of war, still in your hand, seems to hum softly, a silent testament to the raw power you have just displayed. The documents detailing the former regent's poisoning remain scattered across the table, their damning contents now the undeniable focus of the room. What do you do? The foyer, now eerily quiet after the promissory guild woman's furious exit, still hummed with the aftershocks of your declaration. The documents lay scattered, a silent accusation. Your gaze then turned to Councilman Borvin, and your words, sharp and direct, pierced the fragile calm. The enormous Ashcote man flinched visibly as your attention and the sword of war turned to him. His previous, almost triumphant smirk vanished instantly, replaced by a look of profound discomfort. His jowly face, already ruddy, seemed to flush even darker, and his small eyes darted nervously between you and the incriminating papers on the table. He swallowed hard, a prominent bob in his throat. "Tea taxes." Councilman Borvin stammered, his voice thick and reedy, a stark contrast to his usual booming tone. He shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his large hands gripping the arms. "Sir, that is, the matters of the city's coffers are complex, you see. Guild policies, the upkeep of the delves, the maintenance of the city's infrastructure." He trailed off, avoiding your direct gaze, his eyes flicking to Fela Vaniali as if seeking an unspoken plea for intervention. A bead of sweat trickled down his temple. "These are decisions made by the council as a whole, for the greater good of Odrun Fell, I assure you. No one council member dictates such things. It is a collective responsibility." He patted his expansive belly almost instinctively, then quickly dropped his hand, as if realizing the damning implications of his own gesture. He tried to compose himself, puffing out his chest slightly, but his eyes remained wide with apprehension. Fela Vaniali, the elven cleric, had turned her full attention from the now-closed door to the unfolding confrontation with Councilman Borvin. Her silver eyes, sharp and intelligent, narrowed slightly as Borvin stammered his excuses. She glanced briefly at the scattered documents, then back to Borvin, a thoughtful, almost critical expression on her face. She remained silent, her posture still, observing, allowing the moment to play out, her presence a silent, undeniable pressure on the Ashcote man. The lean half-elf steward remained at his post near the ornate door, his near-colourless grey eyes fixed intently on Councilman Borvin. A subtle, almost imperceptible tilt of his head suggested he was listening to every word, his analytical gaze assessing Borvin's every twitch and stammer. He gave no indication of his thoughts, but his stillness was absolute, a silent witness to the sudden shift in power within the Regent's foyer. Your words, challenging the council's integrity regarding the taxes and suggesting its dismantling, cut through the foyer's tense silence. Councilman Borvin, already squirming, seemed to shrink further in his seat, his eyes wide with a desperate, silent plea. Fela Vaniali, the elven cleric, met your gaze, her silver eyes holding a profound seriousness. She paused, her gaze flicking from you to the scattered documents on the table, then back to Borvin, before finally resting on your face.
Reggie Ormanalth.
She began, her voice calm and clear, carrying an unwavering authority that commanded attention.
The city's taxation policies are indeed a matter of council approval, yes. Each guild presents its proposals and the council debates and votes. There are many factors at play, from the upkeep of the city's infrastructure within the Great Club to the welfare of its citizens.
She paused again, her gaze softening slightly, a hint of weariness entering her expression.
However, the claims you've made and the evidence you've presented regarding the previous regent's demise cast a very long shadow over the council's recent history, and indeed over its very legitimacy. If corruption has indeed festered at the highest levels, if the people have been truly exploited as you suggest, then the council has indeed failed in its sacred duty.
Her eyes moved over the documents once more, then settled back on you, a deep, thoughtful crease appearing between her brows.
Dismantling the council is a grave matter, one with immense repercussions for Audrun Fell. But if these allegations prove true, and if the sword of war has truly chosen you, then the very foundations of our governance must be re-examined. Thoroughly.
Her gaze was unwavering, a silent challenge in its depth, as if asking you to fully grasp the weight of your own declarations. Councilman Borvin, hearing Failer's words, looked as though he might spontaneously combust. His jowly face paled, and he began to sweat profusely, his eyes darting wildly between you and the elven cleric, clearly desperate to escape the spotlight that had so suddenly and terrifyingly fallen upon him. He opened his mouth, then closed it, no sound escaping. The lean half-elf steward remained silent, perfectly still, near the ornate door. His near-colourless grey eyes, however, seemed to absorb every word, every nuance of the exchange. A subtle, almost imperceptible shift in his posture suggested a heightened readiness, as if preparing for whatever seismic changes were about to shake the very ground beneath Audrun Fell. Without a word, you turn on your heel, the sword of war still clutched firmly in your hand, and stride purposefully towards the grand doors of the Regent's foyer. The heavy doors swing shut behind you, sealing away the stunned silence of the council chamber. Councilman Borvin watches you go, his jowly face a mask of bewildered relief and lingering fear. He slumps back into his chair, seemingly deflating now that your intense gaze is no longer on him. Fela Vaniali, the elven cleric, watches your silent departure with an unreadable expression. Her gaze, however, lingers on the scattered documents on the table, then flickers to the closed door where the promissory guild woman had been led, a deep, thoughtful crease still on her brow. She seems to be weighing the implications of your sudden, decisive actions. The lean half-elf steward, ever watchful, simply notes your exit with a subtle shift in his stance, his near-colourless eyes following you until you are out of sight. You move through the hushed elegance of the estate hallways, the polished stone cool beneath your boots. The air grows fresher as you pass through grand archways and manicured courtyards, the Murkrun fog beginning to thin, leaving a damp chill in the air as the morning light attempts to break through. After a walk that feels both swift and weighty with the recent events, the familiar sounds and sense of Audrun Fell begin to envelop you. You find yourself emerging onto a bustling thoroughfare in the heart of Audrun Fell. The city, built within the colossal, ancient Great Club, looms around you, a testament to both ancient power and the ingenuity of its inhabitants. Towering chitinous structures, once the weapon's outer shell, now house merchant stalls and guild houses. The air is thick with the scent of damp earth and exotic spices, mingled with the metallic tang of the delves. Commoners, their faces etched with the daily grind, hurry past, their worn clothing a stark contrast to the finery of the estate. The distant clang of hammers from the hilt district, the murmur of trade from the spindle, and the faint, earthy smell of the Barrows district, carried on the breeze, all remind you that you are no longer in the rarefied air of the Regent's estate, but back in the raw, vibrant, and often unforgiving heart of the city, you now claim to rule. What do you do?
Alright. Going to end this one here. Usually I do at least an hour at the most, or an hour at the least. Go a little bit longer sometimes, and maybe a little bit shorter, but the average is basically an hour. And yeah, I will be back with episode 5 tomorrow.